Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Aaron, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
Welcome to Successful But Struggling. We are here today with Dr. Aaron Hurley to talk about a very, very important topic. And the topic for today in our episode 4 is how we're going to get more done with less time and less stress and less energy. And so Aaron is going to share with us some strategies that, frankly, I have to tell you off the bat, they have helped me. And I thought I was amazing at multitasking and managing an exceptionally crazy schedule that sometimes even my team reminds me it's beyond crazy. And in collaboration with Aaron, I've been able to actually find some sense and resonance in my day-to-day life. So Aaron, without further ado, I'd love for you to tell us, just introduce yourself, a couple of words, and then let's go ahead and dive in.
Thank you, Eunicia. It's so good to be here with you today. And one of the things I want to share is that I practiced medicine this pretty much the same way for the first 20 years of my career. And then I was chronically overwhelmed and stressed. The word burnout didn't really resonate with me. I didn't identify with that, but again, exhaustion and overwhelm. And I just figured this is the way it has to be. Hired my first coach at the age of 50, and things began to shift within 3 to 6 weeks. At 6 weeks later, I was coming home from work, about 2 to 3 hours earlier every day. And so what I found is that just because we've been doing something the same way doesn't mean we have to continue. And if you're super busy, there may be a way to use research-based methods to shrink down the amount of time you're spending and actually get more done. When I started working with my coach and leaving the office earlier, I actually got a huge raise several months later because my boss noticed I was actually showing up to work even better than I had been when I was spending those long hours at the office. So what I've done is I've created a course, and it started out a course specifically for healthcare providers who were doing a lot of after hours work and the after hours charting. But the research and the strategies and tools I was using are actually applicable to everyone. So I wanted to share them here in this masterclass. And so if you find yourself doing way too much work after hours that Eunice and I can totally relate to, or maybe being disconnected or feeling like your time at home that should be spent with your family often is infused with worries or overlay with work, this might give you some strategies to help set better boundaries and separate those and, again, get more done with less time and energy.
I love that. Aaron, one of the things that I'd like to say before we dive into, what are some of those things that you recommend folks can implement almost immediately or think about immediately, right? Is to let individuals know that, you heard about the boundaries, and I love the fact that you put them in there. The boundaries, the strategies that are research. I love the idea. It's research-based, right? How many times, and I can tell you personally, I've tried so many different systems, everything from notebooks. If you have questions on notebooks, let's talk. Everything from notebooks to planners to just, how do you organize your calendar? What do you put on? What don't you put on? How do you use perhaps a project management software? What all of the things and the tools that are available to us. And at the end of the day, we're still left with questions and a really long list of to-dos. And so, Aaron, maybe we can just go ahead and dive in on what are those things that you recommend folks do. And then I'll chime in with my own lessons learned because it's made such a big impact for me and in my life.
So one of the first things that I think is critical to making change is mindset. And when we have what we call a closed mindset, it can be really difficult to adopt change. As I said in my own life, stuck in the same mindset for over 20 years. And it took listening to an outside mentor expert coach to challenge my mindset and get me curious. Oh, there might be a different way to think about how I do my work, to listen to other ways of doing things instead of assuming that my way is the best way, which isn't always the case. And as a physician, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, maybe you can relate to that, where you might have a little resistance to listening to outside perspectives or trying something new. But that really is the only way we can create change. Is that something that resonates with you, Eunicia?
Yes, it does. You probably heard it. Here's what I would say, and I'll speak about myself. Okay. So as you're listening to this, this might resonate with you. Oftentimes, as driven individuals, it's hard for us to even when we hear the idea of mindset, it's like, yeah, I've heard this before. Let me share with you how that showed up for me, specifically to tools. And I know, Aaron, you'll talk a little bit about this, but when it came to tools, one of the biggest things for me was as a mindset, right? So once we know that, for example, we should use a planner outside of what you've got on perhaps on your electronic agenda, but a planner that helps you connect with yourself and your mind. And we're not talking about journaling here. We're talking about a planner that allows you to think about the big strategies. For me, this idea of mindset and the idea of resistance, more importantly, came through a very simple example. I'm part of a mastermind, and I kid you not, I probably have about 25 planners that are high-end planners that are the gentleman that owns the mastermind has formulated. And every time I try to use them, because I have 20 plus of them, okay? So in my mind, I'm thinking, I can just make use of those. And when I run out, I'll change the system. But every time I sit with that particular planner, because it's more focused on the, how do you feel today? What are the things that you think you should do better? I don't resonate with that. So my resistance came in through I've got them. They're expensive. I've already more or less paid for them, I suppose. So I'm just going to use them. And it showed up over and over and over again over a period of over 2 years, until one day I said, Aaron, I'm ready to listen. And I am not a physician. We work with a lot of physicians, so I know how physicians think. But for me, it was more about, okay, I know that, for example, Aaron used to talk to physicians a lot about the planning and the open-mindedness and how do we do this. And I tell you what, it's been several weeks since I've started using the new strategies, and it's changed my life. And yes, you know what? I own the 25 planners. So at some point in time, if somebody wants them, yes, we can make sure that the people that resonate with that specific style can use them. But if it's not for me, why was I so resistant for years and years over the fact that I've already paid for them? Think about how powerful that is, right? Sometimes it's something as simple as, but I already have it, so I'm just going to use what I have. And then when I'm done, I'm going to move on. It's the same across the board in so many different categories of life.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't think about what's the cost if I don't change, right? For me, like, my big mindset shift was hiring a coach for the first time at age 50. And there was a cost to it. Absolutely. It was a pretty penny. And yet the cost of not doing it, I would have been stuck in 6 weeks making those changes that I hadn't made in decades. That was completely worthwhile. And so sometimes we have to ask ourselves, as we spend 24/7 with our own mindset, right? We have the most influence on ourselves more than anyone else is. What's the cost of not making this change? Right? Where could you have been maybe if you experimented to say, oh, maybe I'll try this planner. I know I've been using this new one. I'm in my third year. And with my coaching clients that I've helped implement, they are getting different outcomes than they used to. And so that's something where if we continue to be closed minded, we are going to miss out. I have learned lessons from the cleaning crew at my offices, from the support staff, from my own clients, as well as from people I pay to get information from, my coach, my mastermind leaders. But if we can be more open-minded, we are going to get like exponential growth because we can learn from anyone, our children, our parents, our siblings. I know my own sister, when she's listening to me, so I'm her younger sister, and there are times she says, oh my gosh, you'll never believe what I heard on 60 Minutes about washing your hands. And I looked at her and I said, You mean they're going to have more credibility with you than your younger sister who's a physician about washing your hands? Okay. But she was open-minded to the way they presented it than I was. And so maybe she could have learned that lesson decades earlier had she listened to her little sister. But again, that's the power of being open-minded and being willing to listen to new ways, challenge your closed way of thinking, and get curious. I wonder what might happen. And then ditch the judgment or, comparison model or what will people think? Let me just give it a try. And so that open mindset. So as we shift to the second pillar of this, get more done with less time and energy spent, is support. So can you relate to sometimes we find it really difficult to raise our hands and say, I need help? Or maybe it looks like I'm just going to do this thing because I'm the one who does it the best. Or it's going to take too much time and energy for me to teach someone to do it the exact way I want to have it done. And then we just hold on to that. Or I'm not going to invest in a cost of hiring someone to help me do it. So I'm just going to keep doing it, even though it makes me miserable. Any of those resonate with you, Unicia?
I'm sitting here as you're asking the question, I'm pausing, thinking to myself. So that was a really good question, Erin. Actually, here's what I would say is if we were to just change it around, when is the last time that support presented itself? You're going to hear from some really amazing leaders on here on Successful But Struggling, and you're going to be challenged to be thinking outside of the box. I'm all about that, right? By the way. But as you're thinking about how many times has perhaps help showed up in your life and you dismissed it, either because it was maybe too expensive, or maybe you could just get it done for free, or somebody would have given it to you for free somewhere else, and you tried it, but the results were on par. Or maybe you just said, you know what, it's not the time, but you're still in a situation where the same questions, the same feelings of struggle are coming up. That would be the time. If you're going either, ask yourself the question of when, or when didn't you? When did you, or when didn't you? Because it could go both ways. And that's where the question, yes, it made me think about my own stuff, Erin. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think one of the things that I found as a healthcare leader, and this planning system that we talked about also plays into that, is that we would be so busy doing the busy work that the important work didn't get done, the big projects, because we didn't put it in our planner. It was just supposed to get done in between patient care or after hours or who knows when, because there wasn't space built in. But then we also didn't pause to say, take 10 minutes to train someone, or maybe 30 minutes to train someone. So I'll use an example from one of my prior practices. We had hired a medical assistant, and it used to be that the healthcare providers would input information from the paper history taking into the chart. And it was a pretty clunky electronic health system. So when I timed myself, it took me 8 minutes for every patient that I saw to input that. When we paused to train the medical assistant, this is how we would like it entered. And then that person entered it. And then all we had to do was review it and make sure it was accurate. What happened was, because the medical assistant was doing all of the entries for each medical provider, that subtracted 8 minutes from every patient that we saw from our workload. And then it might take us 30 seconds to proof and say, yep, they did it right, or maybe a minute to correct anything that we wanted changed. And then the person inputting that information got so fast and put shortcuts because they were batching all of that together that they could get it done in less than 2 minutes. So if we had never paused, it's called go slow to go fast. If we had never paused to train that person to take 8 minutes and shrink it down to 30 to 60 seconds for every healthcare provider. And at a specialty clinic, we maybe saw 500 to 800 patients a year. But you multiply that times 7 minutes per patient. That's a lot of time and money saved. So how can we pause and say, What's that needle moving decision I can make now? And yes, maybe it's going to cost me an hour or 30 minutes. And then that's going to change so much downstream that it's worth that pause.
And here's what I'm going to say to that, Erin, when you're thinking about, and our listeners, right? As you're thinking about your own situation, right? You heard Erin's example about the clinic. That's probably not going to be applicable to you, and that's okay. But you too have things that you could easily have somebody else handle. And yes, I know we always do everything the best. But the reality is, if we always take everything on, we're never going to be able to just live to see what next levels could look like if we were to be able to step into our higher strategy self. And so, as you're thinking, kind of talking about the support, as you're thinking about, what could that look like for me? That's where, please don't go at it alone. It's going to be really hard. And just like, if you try to clean your closet on your own, it's probably never going to happen, right? Not the way that it should be done, because it's kind of like trying to do surgery on your own self. Let's not do that. Get someone that can help challenge the way you think, give you new ideas, give you new support in terms of what could you be thinking about. And I'll just give you an example. We were at dinner with my husband and one of his business partners and his wife this past weekend. And he too, in their own business, they're looking at, how can they streamline some of the processes. And this was a question that he had of his business partner, who also happens to be his mentor. And it sounded something like this: what are the things you think I should be continuing to focus on taking off my plate and having the team handle? And so, without having the support of somebody looking in, truly that external support, it's going to be hard for you to say, yes, I can truly optimize. And that's where I love what Erin does with her clients, because they can really get down to that level of where you don't feel like, oh my gosh, you're making the decision and then you feel guilty about it. But because you have somebody that you can talk strategy with, it becomes a lot more natural. So I'm sorry, Erin, I stole your thunder with that example.
No, I think other things. So not just in your office, where can you streamline or automate, delegate? Because what you're hanging on to, you're saying yes to in one area, is meaning you're saying no to the things that maybe only you can do. And you have to be able to hand it off and allow for some mistakes, allow for it to be done a little differently. And guess what? Somebody else might do it even better than you, but you'll never know unless you let that go. The other way of getting help is in your own household. And I have been shocked at the number of people who don't allow themselves to get help, such as somebody to help with their yard work, somebody to help with their housekeeping. And I have helped a lot of my clients get over that and just say, would you rather, pay someone to offload that? Somebody I just talked to finally hired a housekeeper, and they were amazed not only about getting their house cleaned, and it was subtracting that time off of their weekly or monthly workload, but that the emotional toll it took when they had that hanging over their head and they're like, oh, I know I need to scrub the toilets. Oh, I know I need to, clean out that cabinet or do the floors. That's a weight that we're carrying until it gets done. But if we know, oh, I don't even have to worry about that anymore, it's going to get done on Friday when the cleaning crew comes. And then that emotional weight departs. And when you have a team, so I've been working with the same cleaning crew in my household for years. And I remember one time enjoying a relaxing time with my family, not worrying about the mess that we were creating because my trusted cleaning crew was coming along and they were going to clean it all up. I didn't have to interrupt this magical moment. I was fully present because I didn't have to worry about, oh my gosh, now I have 3 hours of cleanup. So sometimes we don't recognize the burden we're carrying mentally, physically, and emotionally with those things we choose to continue to hang on to. Yeah. So as we move into the third area, and I have been amazed at how we run businesses, how we run medical practices, even hospitals, and we are not using research-based methods to get the maximum efficiency and effectiveness and productivity because we're not paying attention to research. And so the last area that I'm going to talk about is using the clock to your advantage. So I'll share just 3 quick tips about using the clock. And one analogy I use is that time is like a gas. So gases will expand. If you've ever taken a physics class, they will expand to the amount of space you give them. So you can compress air, so it's under high pressure. You can expand the size of the container and air will expand to fit it. Time is the same way, but you don't get that time back. And so when we put boundaries or bumpers on our time, for example, as I said, I started leaving the office between 5 and 6 p.m. every night. And the normal in the past decades had been anywhere from 7, 8, 9, 10, even 11 o'clock at night. And when I said I will be going home and shutting down things by 6 p.m. every night, I put a boundary on the length of my workday. And I was no longer inviting a workday that lasted until through dinner and into the evening time. If I didn't put that boundary there, I was going to run over it every time. So can we learn to put boundaries on the time we're going to allot to something? And say, I'm going to get this project done in the next 2 hours. I'm going to allow myself 10 minutes for each of these smaller tasks, and then stick with it. Use the clock. Another thing that we can use the clock to, and this may seem counterintuitive, especially to busy business owners, entrepreneurs, physicians, leaders, is that how many of us have sat at our desk, glued to the computer, hours and hours on end without a break? Any of us guilty of that? Yeah. And what I've learned from some of the most productive people that I've learned from is that we decrease our efficiency. We decrease our ability to make good decisions. We get fatigue. Sometimes it's physical fatigue, mental fatigue, emotional fatigue, even visual fatigue, staring at a screen for so long. And so using the clock, setting a timer to interrupt our work and remind ourselves it's time to take a break. And what will happen is if we take a good break, we close our eyes for 30 seconds, get off the computer screen, get up and move our bodies around, shift our energy, drink some water, eat, use the facilities. Then when we come back from a short break, maybe it's 2 minutes to 5 minutes or 10 minutes, we are going to pop our energy, our decision-making back up to our A game. And then what's going to happen is that's going to slowly dwindle. And then can we learn to take another break? Somewhere between 45 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes or so, short break, and then get right back at it. And that's going to help us be much more effective and save our energy and not run on empty fumes the entire rest of the day if we don't take breaks. The third thing I'd like to talk about is the emotional and mental toll of multitasking and toggling between activities. And so if we can get better at not toggling back and forth with things, what I call mega batching, so that you're doing similar activities and sticking with it until they're done instead of trying to go back and forth between things. And then also eliminating or decreasing the number of interruptions you get, because that can put you behind 23 to 25 minutes to get back to the effective rate that you were working at before the interruption. So just a few quick strategies that you can do that will help save you time and keep your energy levels high throughout your workday.
I love that, Erin. So if you're interested to learn more, which I'm sure you are, make sure you go to erinhurleymd.com, and you can also find Dr. Hurley on really everywhere on social media. Ask the questions. That's my biggest thing. Ask the questions, think outside of the box, and you will see new levels of success in your own life. And stay tuned for our next episode on Successful but Struggling. Listen, we're also always looking forward to hearing ideas and perspectives that perhaps you want us to cover. So if you have such strong desires, find either one of us and either one of our hosts between myself, Erin, Mim, Joanne. It would be our pleasure to make sure that we put it on the docket and that we have those conversations. Whether they're tough or easy, we'll love them, I promise. I hope you have a blessed one. We'll chat soon.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.